everybody, my name is Keeley and welcome to my reading nook. This is basically just going to be me talking about books and talking about books I like, books I don't like, what I'm going to read, what I read in the past, reading vlogs, kind of all the booktube stuff. I've been into it recently, I've been thinking a lot about it, I've been thinking about doing something more creative for a long time, and so here I am. I'm just gonna talk about everything that I love about reading, which is a lot. So today I'm just gonna be doing a July wrap up. So it's really gonna be a reading recap of sorts, just talking about each of the books that I read in July and what I thought about them without spoilers. So without further ado, I think we'll just get into it. I think I'm gonna go chronologically. So the first book that I read in July was If Then by Jill Lepore, and for those of you who know Jill Lepore, she is a historian, and so this book is a history, and it's a history of a company called the Simulmatics Corporation, which is like kind of funny to say, Simulmatics, and I found it really interesting because I love history books, but I don't typically get that interested in the history of tech at all. I don't know if any of you are that same way. It feels kind of silly to say that, because why wouldn't I be interested in something that's such a prevalent part of all of our everyday lives? But I don't know, it's never been that interesting to me. I've never really cared to learn more about the history of different technologies, specifically modern technologies. So in this book, specifically, they're talking about the social science of predicting human behavior. So everything that kind of goes on with Facebook and Instagram and all of these things that have happened with companies predicting human behavior and using ads and things like that to change human behavior and sort of the morality of that or lack thereof. I had obviously thought a lot about those things before because they've been in the news, but basically the story of this book is that Jill Lepore is walking through an archive, and she's digging through an archive, as historians do, and she comes across some records of the Simulmatics Corporation, which was essentially this company that operated for not that many years but had a huge impact on the way that corporations use data about people today and how they use that data to predict human behavior and then therefore change human behavior. And so the Simulmatics Corporation can really be seen as, the catalyst for all of that happening, and I found that fascinating. I mean, the book talks a lot about really huge events in world history. It talks a lot about, the election of JFK. It talks about other political movements. It talks about the civil rights movement. It talks a lot about the Vietnam War and the way that different parties profited off of these things and used data science in a really sinister way. And I found it fascinating. So if anyone is looking for a book that's sort of going to get you back into history, it'd been a minute since I read something like this, something that felt a little bit academic to me, and it really helped me dive back into nonfiction in a really meaningful way. So I would highly recommend If Then by Jill Lepore, and the subtext on this one is how the Simulmatics Corporation invented the future. So if that seems interesting to you, I know it did to me. Now, the next book that I'm going to talk about is Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And so, I mean, we all love Malcolm Gladwell. We know him, we love him. He's our favorite, Canadian superstar. And he essentially, every time I've picked up one of his books, I've learned a lot. I've been really fascinated by it. I love his podcast, Revisionist History. And I just really like the way that he breaks down concepts. So when I picked up this book, it's called Talking to Strangers. I was really anticipating something similar to, Outliers. I was trying to think of the last one that I read by him, Outliers. And I found this to be very different. Outliers is so interesting, and I think I would count that as like one of my favorite nonfiction books. I really thought it was fascinating. But Talking to Strangers, I found to be a lot more impactful. So Outliers, I know it's stuck with me in certain ways, but not in others, if that makes sense, because it's so academic. It's kind of like I remember the anecdotes, I remember, the pilots, and I remember the hockey players, and I remember the 10,000 hours, but I wouldn't necessarily tell you that I could remember the big themes associated with that book. This book, on the other hand, is completely different. I picked it up thinking it was going to be similar to Outliers in that way, where it would be separate anecdotes, and it is. It's written in that same Malcolm Gladwell style, but Talking to Strangers really breaks down why human communication is so difficult and why two people talking to each other or interacting with each other can go so wrong. So I wasn't expecting for this book to be as heavy as it was. It deals with really intense themes, and so I would put a couple of trigger warnings on this book of sexual assault and also police brutality. So it talks a lot about the Sandra Bland case, and it also talks about Brock Turner and things of that nature. So if those are sensitive topics for you, and they are for everyone, but if there's specifically things that you're trying to avoid, I wouldn't pick up this book. But I would say that for me, I found it so wonderful to have that Malcolm Gladwell style paired with these deep themes that really make you contemplate the way that human beings interact with one another. So if you're interested in the way that Malcolm Gladwell writes, but you're looking for something a little bit deeper, I think Talking to Strangers would be a great one for you. So I would absolutely recommend this one. I got it on sale at my local bookstore, so I highly recommend. Yeah. And after I read Talking to Strangers, I realized that, a lot of the year for me had been spent in nonfiction, and I was kind of in this place where I was reading a lot of nonfiction, but getting excited about getting back into fiction. And so the first thing that I did was pick up a bunch of books from my local bookstore, even though I have a huge TBR shelf that maybe I'll show one day. But I was really interested in getting back into fiction, and so I picked up a few, and getting back into fiction after nonfiction can be really tough sometimes, because your frame of mind is very different when you're reading nonfiction versus reading fiction, at least for me. And so I found it a little bit difficult to transition, and the first book that I picked up helped me get out of that nonfiction rut and immediately transition to fiction. So I would say that now, going into August with my reading, I am so into fiction. And so that book, I actually don't have it here with me right now, and that's because I lent it to my mom. So I hope my mom enjoys it as much as I did. But that book is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. And I loved it. Essentially, that book follows two very different families in an Ohio town in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. In the late 20th century. It follows these two families in this very affluent Ohio town called Shaker Heights. And one is a white family that is very wealthy, and the other is a single mom and daughter, and they're sort of nomadic. And these two families clash, and specifically the two mothers clash. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that they've chosen to do very different things with their lives. So, the mother who's chosen to take her single daughter, her only child, and live a more nomadic lifestyle. She's an artist, they're not tied down to anything, versus this very suburban, very classic white picket fence type of family. And so you sort of watch the children and their lives and how their lives kind of intermingle, and then you see the two mothers clash. And it, I think, frames really well class dynamics and a lot of socioeconomic differences between these two families, and you watch how that plays out. It brings up themes of motherhood and what does it mean to be a mother, and what is it that makes you a mother? Is it biological parenthood or no? And it also, I think, and I've heard this a lot about Celeste Ng's work, that she really masterfully deals with sibling dynamics, and I found that absolutely to be true. The more affluent family has 4 children, and so all of their dynamics are discussed in a really fascinating way. So you find yourself rooting for characters in certain moments and then really angry with characters in certain moments, but I think that you find yourself doing both evenly, if that makes sense. Like, I think Celeste Ng does a great job at really developing her characters in a way that you really see them as real people, and you see them as not good or bad, but both, and just like real people are. So I would absolutely recommend Little Fires Everywhere if you're interested in getting back into contemporary fiction. I found that to be a really great book for me to dive back into fiction. So Little Fires Everywhere, Celeste Ng. I wish I had it right here because I really like the cover of that book. I also, after I read that book, I watched the, I think it's an HBO series. I watched the HBO series and I liked it a lot. I will say that the book pans out a little bit differently, and I'm typically always in the camp of the book is better, but I think that the show was great. I also really enjoyed it. So after I finished that book, I was really interested in continuing on the fiction wave, and the book that I chose to follow up with that was The Sea of Lost Girls by Carol Goodman. I was on vacation, I was at the beach, and I was kind of interested in having that ocean vibe, but something a little bit darker, you know? We're not talking about like Beach Read by Emily Henry here, like we're talking about like cliffy beach and not sandy beach, if that makes sense. So that's sort of the tone of this book. Is it's coastal Maine, I believe, somewhere, coastal Maine, Haywood Academy. So it's a boarding school in Maine, and it has a little bit of dark academia vibes, if that makes sense. What I'll say about this book is that I enjoyed it for what it was. So I was going into this thinking like, you know what, this is gonna be so fun. I just want a fun fiction mystery. And what the book is about is a woman named Tess, and it's from her perspective, and she has a son named Rudy, and she has a husband who is not Rudy's father. And so this book again deals a lot with what it means to be a mother, what your responsibility is to your child, and what it means to be a family that's been splintered. And so there's a lot of trauma associated with Tess and Rudy's lives together, and that manifests itself once there's a tragedy that occurs at the school. And this is not a spoiler, this is on the back, but a girl at the school passes away, and they conclude that she was murdered. And so Tess sort of goes through a lot of tumultuous experiences, kind of trying to figure out what happened to the girl who died, and what her involvement might have been in it, what her son's involvement might have been in it, what her other colleagues at the school's involvement might have been in it. I mean, the writing was not anything insane, I'll say that. It was really good for what it was. Like, I appreciated a fun mystery, and I will say I didn't see it coming, like the plot twists that happened, I didn't see them coming. So for me, that's like the mark of a good mystery, is you're not, or a thriller, you're not able to predict it all the time. And so I'd recommend it. Like, if you're going to the beach and you're going on vacation or looking for something fun, highly recommend. You know, if you're looking for war and peace, like this isn't that, but I really enjoyed it. And I feel like if I was going to get even further into fiction, like I feel like things like this would also just be fun as a break from heavier topics. And there's heavy topics in here. I would say I would flag this for minimal amount of domestic violence. So if that's something that is tough for you, and in addition to that, I would also flag this for grooming. Yeah, but definitely worth a read if you're interested in a mysterious rocky coastline beach read. Oh my god, I feel like I've been like slouching this whole time, so I'm gonna like sit up. I'm sorry if that's been really annoying, but yeah, so that was The Sea of Lost Girls. And after that, I definitely continued my fiction wave, but I was interested, I think, in something that was a little bit more elevated. And I have a lot to say about this one, but I'll just tell you what it is. It's Normal People by Sally Rooney. And as we all know, or if you don't, no worries if you don't, I'm not trying to gatekeep literature here. It's very popular. It's a very popular book. Sally Rooney's a very popular... Okay, I'm sorry. My camera ran out of space right as I started talking about. Normal People by Sally Rooney. So I was saying that this book is really, really popular, but I personally had a couple of problems with it. This book is about two characters. You mainly follow two characters throughout, from high school to college to post-college, and that's Connell and Marianne, and they're two British teenagers, and there's a lot going on here. There's differences between these two characters for many reasons. One is that their socioeconomic statuses are different. Connell's mother actually works in the home as a housekeeper for Marianne's family. However, so Marianne's family is wealthy and Connell's family is not. However, at school, Marianne is a social pariah and Connell is kind of star of the sports teams and he's very popular. So, you know, out in the world, Marianne would be on top of the world, right? Theoretically, because she's wealthy and he's not. But in this school setting, she's the one that's ostracized and he's not. And so you watch them sort of form a friendship even across those socioeconomic divides, and then you watch that blossom into romance, and then you watch that romance travel throughout their lives, and you see it change, you see it break off, you see it reignite, and you just kind of watch the ups and downs that are associated with normal people. And so I found that interesting. It wasn't like a cookie cutter love story. It was very much, there were ups and there were downs. It reminded me more of real life relationships than a lot of other books that I've read. But my problem with this personally is that I do think that there should have been some flags on this, basically about just about sexual violence. And I think that was something that I didn't know going in was part of this book, and it is a part of this book. So if that's something that's a sensitive topic for you, I would stay away from it. However, I definitely understand why this is such a favorite for people. Sally Rooney's writing is really interesting. I like her style a lot. I do plan on checking out her other work. First on that list for me would be Conversations with Friends. And from there, I hopefully will have a little bit of a better experience. But so I would say that for this book for me was a solid 3 out of 5. It was a great story. It was really interesting to follow these characters throughout their lives, but for me, I just was really off-put by some of the content in here, and that's just me. That's my own personal opinion. So no, I completely understand this is one of your favorite books of all time. Totally get it. But yeah, for me, I just found it a little bit difficult to get through for that reason. I guess the way that I would describe it is kind of like edgy teen stuff, and I was like, it's not for me, I don't think. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. But yeah, so that was my reading month for July. That was pretty good for me. I feel like I usually average, I got 5 books here, well, 4 here, 1 with my mom, but 5 in total, and that was pretty good for me in a month. I hope to start reading more and kind of keeping up those numbers, if not doing better. And yeah, I think that the next video that I'll probably put up is going to be an August TBR. I'm still kind of curating my TBR for August. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for coming to my reading corner.